Just now is a very, it's what shall I say? It's what I call the beginning, the Hadoma to the method, or the beginning, the conceptual understanding of what I'm talking about, my method and so on and so forth. And it itself involves Hashkafa. So I cannot explain it now. It is more fundamental to Hashkafa than almost anything else. Really. And this is something that you'll only understand with time later on. As far as we're concerned, when you look at the Torah itself is composed of Tayag mitzvahs, right? 613 mitzvahs. And if you take a Rambam, for example, you take all the halachas, take a Mishnah Torah, right? You look at many halachas. There's thousands and thousands of halachas, essentially. And we say to ourselves, there are many halachas, each of these halachas connect to certain of the Tayag mitzvahs. Essentially, every Yid is supposed to Makayim the Tayag mitzvahs, whatever's noig or what's not noig and so on, to the best of his ability and so on. So essentially, the way we see mitzvahs is essentially what's called the behavioral expectation. The Rebbe says, do this, don't do this. That's the sense of lo eseh and lo eseh. And there are 613 varieties. We may use the term here, varieties. Essentially what it is. What does it mean, do this and don't do this? Do this means it's a behavior which is expected, specific activity. Don't do this is also behavior expected, but it's a withdrawal rather than a connect on a sense. But it's behavioral in the sense that the Rebbe is telling you how to behave. We have grown up with an understanding of Torah on basically these terms, and we know basically from what we're taught that to Mekayim the Torah is what it is to be an Erech Yid, to be a Yiras Shamayim. That's essentially what the whole world revolves around as far as we're essentially concerned. But if you really think about it, the matter goes far, far deeper and it's much more complex, but in a direction that will appear to be very strange. When I say complex, I'm not referring to the fact that you have the Gemara and then you have the Rishonim and you have the Acharonim and you can go through the nuances of the halacha and this and that. I'm not talking about that kind of complexity. I'm talking about something entirely different. And what I want to do is I want to present a question to the Ulam here and then see what you deal with. It says in the Torah lo signoi, right? Lo signoi. Whether it's the Atzef or wherever it is in Torah that there's a portion. Lo signoi. You cannot go and take somebody else's item. You can't go and take somebody's chepsa, someone's item and walk away with it and steal it. Or rob it, whatever you want to say. Lo signoi, you can't do that, right? Now, the New York State, the legislature of the New York State, and one day they sat down and they all wrote up what's called the New York State Penal Code. What the New York State Penal Code is essentially, it's a list of all the do's and don'ts. It says what you can and cannot do. And in the criminal code, one of the things in the criminal code is a certain behavior, an item called larceny. You cannot walk over and steal somebody's possession. You go into somebody's car and you drive it away. If it's worth over X amount of dollars, I think $500, it's called grand larceny. Okay? So, what we find is that the secular courts have constructed laws of all sorts of theft in a similar way as the Torah. Now, I asked you this question. When the Torah says lo signoi and the New York State law says lo signoi, or thou shalt not commit larceny, essentially what is there a difference in the two statements?
One you get schar for, the other you don't.
One you get schar for, the other you don't. That's an interesting point. One you get schar for, and the other one you don't. That's an interesting point. What? What happens if you steal in the Torah, lo signoi? What's the Einish? The Knas, and lo sigzoil. What's the Einish and lo sigzoil? What? No. You have to return the Karen.
That is the way to be mefaken, that you over the Aveira. First you over the Avera.
Yeah, but what, okay, is there an einish? Is there an it's not an einish, you're right. Yeah, there's not an einish as such, really, except if you're over the thing, you have to return Eish Gazela Shegoza. That's essentially what it is. What happens if you commit grand larceny in the New York State? What happens to you? Essentially. What? No, I'm not. What should happen to you? You go to jail. Get 1 to 5, whatever the story is. There's nothing that can happen. But what should happen is you're supposed to go to jail. Okay? Fine. Okay, so there are different ways of looking at fine. But the Torah says, right, sigzoil, right, signoim, and the New York State Code says, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not rob. Commit theft, loss, and so on. Is there a difference in our distinguished colleague over here says that, yes, one of the things is that if you makayim the thing in the Torah, you get schar for it. It's one of the mitzvahs. But if you makayim the thing of the goyim, the legal, the legal fact, you just don't go to jail. That's all.
Is there a way of being makayim like signa?
Where?
Yeah, by not doing
it. Yeah, by not doing it.
You get schar for not doing it?
Yeah, but in the Torah?
Yeah.
Sure. Yes. It's one of the Taig mitzvahs. Sure. You don't eat chazan, you get schar? Of course. Every time you see a piece of chazan, it really looks good. It looks bacon and eggs, and you really have a time for it, and you don't eat it, you get schar. Not only that, every time you don't eat it, every second that goes by and you don't do it, you also get schar. Because it's a mitzvah. Every time you're makayim, one of the lawyers say, you'll get schar. You kovish of course. Yeah. You get schar all the time, that's a mitzvah. You're commanded, you do it, you get schar. Hazoyed is fine. Okay, is there any other difference that one could see? There has to be a very, very fundamental difference.
One is man-made law.
Oh, okay. One is divine law, one is man-made law. Yeah. That sounds nice. That really sounds good.
Words.
That's words. Very signal was given by the Bereshom, and thou shalt not commit larceny was written by men. Okay, fine. So is there a chilik in the Zach itself? That's a chilik in the Makor, in the origin. Who told us what the thing is? So in one case, do we need the Bereshom to deliver us that piece of information? No. That's why it's called the Mishpat. If the Bereshom had never said Lo Signoim, would we have figured out by ourselves? Of course we would have. So the truth of the matter is, whether the Bereshom said or not is really not that relevant. We would have said Lo Signoim by ourselves, right? That's what the world has done. There's a law of theft in all societies.
But the Eivshter gives you schar. That's why he's doing something. That's what the Eivshter says. You're living schar.
Oh, okay. That's his contribution. That is the definite statement. But there's something far more fundamental and far more profound.
Well, the penal code just tells you something in the cold-blooded method. That if you steal, they don't really say don't steal. They say if you do steal, this is what happens if you do.
So the Torah says also, if you steal, you better return it. Don't steal. No, the penal code says also don't steal. It's ethical system. It's based on statutes. It implies don't do it. That's the implication. It doesn't have to say don't do it. I mean, it's obvious.
I think maybe more that the court, the man-made court, man-made law, usually has backup. In other words, it's either instant punishment or police.
It's enforced.
It's enforced.
It's enforced.
However, listening to the Torah, I mean, somebody can steal and get by. It's not
enforced.
It's not enforced.
Now it's not enforced. Right. But in the time of the Sanhedrin, was it enforced? Yes. So the presence and absence of Sanhedrin is really a secondary. The point is, as far as the Torah is concerned, the Torah would prefer there to be a Sanhedrin, and the Dayanim, the Masechet called Sanhedrin, to be enforced too. So obviously it's the same. Both are enforced, except right now it's hard to enforce the signals in terms of a bezdin. I mean, if you go to a bezdin, okay, that's one thing. That's a chazon in terms of the massive. But there's no difference in the situation here. No. You want to offer anything?
I can think of it.
I don't want to hear it. No, because I want to develop here, and you probably know the answer since you tend to do the shurim. That's why. You're not? Okay, I'll give you the last thing. Let me see if I can't bridge it out of here and get it up. And I'll give you the last thing because I'm afraid you'll know it, and your mind is already informed. It's informed, so I'm afraid. I want to see if I can. Anything else?
Well, there's a little difference in the penal code. You have to get caught to get a punishment.
Okay, in the Torah.
In the mail caught. I mean, there's a thing that's not getting caught.
How you get caught? If you don't get caught, you have to return it.
But the din Shemayim, again, oynish.
What's that?
But that's again, the din Shemayim, not to get caught. But that's again, oynish and
What's the din in the Shemayim? What is that din?
That's why it's not to get caught.
Wait, we must be a little better. What do you mean not to get caught? What's mythos?
You can't hide your action
From who?
From the righteous level.
He knows about it.
He knows about it.
And therefore what happens? There's an oynish. Oh. He's beginning to say that's along the lines here.
The Torah's last thing is on the Gavra, it's on the person himself. There is more on the Chesed. You shouldn't have other.
No, that's No, I understand. No. They also have chayv. Who was chesed?
As much as that, it shouldn't be in your possession.
No.
How about the fact that it's built on certain man-made laws that built on?
I think they also be
Basically, because they said it doesn't mean they'll punish you, but the person doesn't become more mechuyev only if it is.
How about the fact that it's built on concepts and attitudes at a given time?
About built on what?
These laws are built on certain concepts and attitudes as of a given time.
I mean, they can change. Doesn't change with it. One other thing that what do you call it, is being said here is that the Torah laws are immutable. They essentially remain the same, but the laws of society or culture, society change. Like the law of theft is not the same law of society, but the issue of theft is. That does remain the same. But I want to follow. Yeah, you want.
Kind of spiritual program that's done.
Okay, now you said he said what a little better what you really were implying, what you meant. Truth of the matter is, in the Goyish Welt, if you steal and you're not caught, right? Nothing can steal. You got away with it. You see, you totally got away with it. But in Torah, if you steal, it has nothing to do with being caught, because since that ma'aseh is a lav, it's a mitzvah and it's a lav, right? As such, what happens is if you do a lav, it affects your neshama. You have damaged your makar, a ruchnistic element in your neshama itself that relates to it. Whereas in the Goyish thing, it has nothing to do with it. So what we see is an interesting thing.
Go and say when you cheat yourself, it affects you.
Sitting up here. Okay. Eddie Cohen. What have I written up here? Essentially, I've summarized this, but what is the essential difference in the following? In the Goyish Welt, don't steal. If you steal, that will result in a prison term, essentially. In the Torah Welt, don't steal. If you steal, it results in the kilkul and the neshama. It's pagam. A ruch is a pagam that you cannot see, or is not evident. You see what I'm saying? Now, in the secular world, if you steal, you will get prison. But in order for this effect to ensue from this cause, something must combine them. And what combines them is a concept, is an enforcer. You see. There's an enforcer. You have to get caught. But getting caught is not enough. You got to get in front of a judge and you got to be put in jail. There's something that has to schlep you from where into jail. There must be an enforcer. Okay? Over here. What's the enforcer over here? What? Who's what? I don't know how to come from back. What produced in fifth? What produced the kilkul and the neshama? You did it yourself. That's true. But what you did it? Yeah. But how does the kilkul arise?
One thing.
The Bria does it. Reality does it. There is no enforcer. It's part of the Metzius of the Bria. You see, if I lift this chair and I drop it, what happens to the chair? Where does it go? It falls. That's the cause. I had the chair, right, and I let go, right? It falls down to the ground. It heads towards the earth, right? What produced that effect? Who? Was there an enforcer? Did someone take it down? No. What? Gravity. What is gravity? Gravity is a force of nature. It's a force of reality. It's built into the system. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you steal, you get a tickle in the neshama. How did it happen? It's built in. The same way gravity is built in, so is that also. This we see a very, very important factor, a very critical thing. That the thing which unites the cause and effect in the secular world, you see, is caused by an external agent. It's externally caused or affected. What causes this is internally affected.
So you have an internal force.
Yeah. What does it mean internally? It means that the cause and effect relationship is inscribed into the reality itself. You see, just like every law of physics and every law of science. You see, if I, for example, if I open up a tape recorder and I start talking, my voice will be recorded. Why is it recorded? Because we take advantage of the laws of physics in such a way, right? In such a way where we use or manipulate the laws of reality to do that. That's how it works. There's nobody here that takes my voice and puts it in a box.
Well, the kilkel neshama happens, it's the same thing even if he doesn't steal it. If he was frustrated in his attempt to steal, he'll still have the kilkel neshama.
No, he won't. He'll have a different kind. Not that he won't have a kilkel neshama, because there's no meister there. He will not get a love.
If he tries stealing something and the thing all of a sudden goes out of his reach.
Did he take it out of the rishus of the other one into his rishus?
No.
Then he's not
He
chayav.
tried very hard.
Doesn't matter. He's not a big name. You're not nenash in the nefesh ben avera. When you nenash, you did it.
That's why the machshava is not mitzvah.
Stop. I don't want to go into that. You can
happen to the age to put the kilkel there because he stole it to be able to make that happen.
It's part of the bria.
But if you don't steal it, isn't it something
then it won't happen.
in the mind?
No, then it won't happen. In other words, the following thing. If you don't steal it, you try and steal it, but if you don't take it out, for example, if you're carrying something on Shabbos, right, you're sitting in your house, right, and you walk outside from one rishus to another, you're over hitzor, right? It's allowed. There's now kilkel in your neshama, okay? You're in the house and you have the key, right? And you're about to go out, but you stop, right? There's no kilkel.
If you stop because of yourself, you want to stop. But what if that key was pulled out of here? Somebody grabbed it as you're walking out.
It depends on what the halacha is. The point is...
No, what I'm saying is that not because you didn't want to steal, you stopped because you felt I don't want to steal.
What?
You stopped. It was taken away from you.
Then nothing happened.
Because the Metzius of Geneva, so you have to have it.
Yes, the Metzius of Geneva, or the Metzius of Geneva means you have to take it from one rishus into your rishus. If it doesn't happen, there's no kilkut. It doesn't matter.
Definition of Geneva is
the halacha.
The halacha of Geneva is that's what it is.
Put into the Bria, the inbuilt laws, would that control?
No, please.
There's a difference between
the halacha defines the reality. The halacha tells you when there is a reality effect. That's what the halachas are. What I'm simply really trying to say at this point is a very important concept, that the laws of the Torah are not behavioral descriptions. The laws of the Torah is not the Baruch telling you to do something and not to do. That's not really what it is. Those are the laws of mankind. The laws of the Torah are laws of reality, just like the laws of physics and the laws of chemistry and so on and so forth. What the Baruch is saying is, don't do this, because if you do this, this is what's going to happen. You see. And how is it going to happen? Reality will take care of itself. Just as, for example, if you jump over a cliff, you will go down and get killed, you know? Why? Not that the Baruch suddenly a hand came out in the Shemayim and took you and took you down. The universe is built in such a way where there are forces. There are laws of motion. Teva, it's called Teva. And reality is constructed that way. It's constructed that so well that we can't even see the Yad Hashem behind it. But these are the laws of nature. What the laws of Torah are also the laws of nature, but we're not talking about the nature of the Gashmistical world, we're talking about the world of Ruchnius.
And you inflict your own damage.
Yeah, you inflict your own damage. But, again, what I'm saying is here is the following, that the laws of the Torah are laws, are natural laws, that don't apply to this reality. They apply to a Ruchnistic reality, or to a reality which is beyond the senses. But that reality also runs by law. It runs by law, just like this one does. You see what I'm saying? It's
a different set of circumstances, different environment.
Punishment in addition.
What's that?
The punishment in addition to the reality.
Which reality?
Father tells his son, don't go into God's house. It's when you get hurt. Father goes, this is because you don't listen to me. You got hurt.
That's another thing.
There's a punishment in addition.
Yes, there's an additional one also.
What you were saying,
but I don't want to. That's not critical. The critical thing, what I'm saying,
there's a different level of existence that exists, a different reality, and those and the halakha is governing there.
Yeah. What I'm basically saying is the following. I can't. It's too much. What I'm basically saying is the following. As far as we're concerned, there are two realities. There are two sets of experiences. There's a reality that's subject to the five senses, which is the reality of our universe. It's the physical universe, right? And the behavior of the physical universe is understood through the laws of science. It's understood through the laws of physics, through the laws of chemistry, through the laws of biology, and that all these things and so on. There is another reality, you see, which is beyond the senses, which is composed of a different kind of substance. That substance is beyond the five senses. That substance is called Ruchnius. It's a substance, that's all it is. And there are beings and there are things that are going on that exist in that plane that we cannot know. For example, a neshama. A neshama is a real live being. It's there, it's a real being. But its substance is composed of material which is purer than physical substance. It's not composed of the 92 elements. A neshama is not subject to the five senses. It cannot be seen or heard or smelled or anything, or touched. Because it's composed of material which is beyond. There are things in this world which are also composed of material beyond the senses, for example. Certain kinds of gases cannot be seen, smelled, felt, or anything. You see, light, energy. Energy is something which is also subject to the senses, can be seen. But there are energy levels which cannot be seen either. X-rays. The presence of X-rays in the room, there's no way you could know about it. You know what I mean? You cannot see X-rays, you cannot touch it or feel it. You know, you can get a what? Yes. So it is subject to certain aspects of it, but to the direct five senses it's not knowable. You see, but there's another reality beyond even that. It's not even measured. It cannot be measured or observed. It has no contact. It has contact with this world, but we have no access to that world. And that world is composed of a substance called Ruchnius, spirit. That's the word zone. With beings composed of it. And the beings in that world are Neshamas, Malachim, Olamas. There are certain things which are composed of these things. We do not know what we cannot see it on. But these things are subject to specific law. They're just as rigidly determined by their laws as we are determined by us. Where do you see this? You see this in many places. For example, even Malachim. A Malach can only do a specific task. It cannot deviate it from its task. There are certain things, if a person knows certain pulas, a person can get a malach to do what he wants it to do. You see, there are certain chokhmas, where if a person knows the name of a malach in a certain way, in certain shemus, it's called shemus, a person can say certain shemus and certain things, and force a malach to do what he wants to do. You see, how can he force a malach to do what he wants to do? How does he do it? I mean, even if he knows the language, so he can say, Hezek to malach, I want to speak to you for a minute, I'll call you down. So he says certain shemus, suddenly Gabriel doesn't come down. You can't see Gabriel, but there's an evidence of Gabriel in some way. Something moves, something in some way that Gabriel. So he says, do me a favor, I want you to do something for me. So Gabriel says, I don't want to do it for you, get lost. That's what Gabriel could say. The answer is, the person has a certain koyach by using certain shemus, and he can force Gabriel to do certain things. Why? Because Gabriel is subject to laws also. Every malach is subject to certain laws. And what the Chochmah Shemus means, if you know what composes the malach, and you know his inner structure, and how he's built, and how he works, you can control him.
It's like a machine.
It's like a machine, in that way, exactly. Do you understand what I'm saying? In such a way that you can actually force a malach to do what you want, and you can force him to do things that he doesn't even want to do. You see? Because he's subject to laws. A malach or neshama is a being. It's a being that has a certain physiology and anatomy. Just like the human body. The human body has a certain physiology, has a certain form, has a certain shape. And it has certain organs that function in a certain way. You see what I'm saying? It has an anatomy, it's composed of a skeleton and a certain structure, and it has a physiology, it's composed of certain organs that interrelate in certain ways. There's something called the digestive system, for example, that takes out certain kinds of food, decomposes the food, and then metabolizes the food to get energy. That's one of the systems that we have in the body. So the body that we have has certain structures functioning in a certain way. You see, if something goes wrong with the body, for example, if a certain virus gets in the body, how does the virus do damage in the body? The virus gets in the body and it affects one of the structures against its will. You know, it disrupts it. What do you mean how does it disrupt it? The virus comes over and says to the stomach, hey, look, I want to cause you problems? Of course not. Because the virus is able to go into the cells and disrupt something and the stomach has to malfunction. It has no choice. You see, because the virus has this clear. You see, and then as soon as an antibiotic comes in the system, the virus gets cleaned out. Why? Because the antibiotic runs after it with a sledgehammer? No, because the antibiotic is able to again connect with the virus in a certain way and decompose it or destroy it or whatever have you. But the thing runs on strict law and order. That's called teva. You see what I'm saying? Now, that concept is the same thing which is true of ruchnius. It's also run by law and order. That's why what it means we would say the world is built on din. Din means cause and effect. You see, cause and effect. But when the Rebbeinu Shem creates din, it's different than when man creates din. When the Rebbeinu Shem says that this will cause this, it means that it's built into the reality that this causes this. That this reality is composed of certain structures, functioning in a certain way, and will obey certain kind of laws. It is built in. The cause and effects are automatically there. You see, when man says, if you do this, then this can happen, nothing is built in. So it requires an external enforcer to see that the thing is carried out. All the laws of man, all the laws that man make are the same thing. It's in the same kind of way. This is the fundamental difference between the halachas of the Torah and the halachas of society. The halachas, that's what it says. It says, the halachas of the Torah are really laws of reality, which were put in behavioral terms. The Rebbeinu could have said, if you take something from the rishus of one person, and you took in your own rishus, you will have a pagam on the neshama. But the Rebbeinu didn't say that way. You see, the Rebbeinu could have described to you the reality of the event that's going to happen. You see what I'm saying? Instead he didn't do it. Instead he said, Lo Signoi. Instead of telling you the event which will materialize, the cause and effect reality which will materialize, he simply put it in behavioral terms. He put it in terms of telling you what to do and what not to do. You see what I'm saying? That's how he described it. Now mind you, you could do the same thing in physics, for example. You can say, thou shalt not jump off the cliff. You know what I mean? You could put that. That's all it says. Why? Because if you jump off the cliff, you will be subject to the force of gravity, and goodbye and good luck. You know what I mean? But you can take a textbook on physics and write it behaviorally. You can write it as a description of what to do and what not to do. You can take any book of reality and write it like mitzvahs. Instead of writing what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, you write what you're supposed to do and not do. You know what I mean?
Well, it's the case in ordinary experience also. You don't put your hand on fire because
what?
It's the case in ordinary experience also.
Yes.
So it's a given. You don't put your hand on fire because you know it's hot.
Yeah.
The ontology in general is the same paragraph.
You see what I'm saying? So.
The ontology generally same paragraph.
Yeah. Right.
Well, the what is
generates?
The what is generates what you do. In other words, if something is hot, you aren't going to.
Excuse me. It's a private joke. No. No, leave. Forget about it. Don't forget about it.
It's just a short expression.
Forget about it.
Remember from grammar school.
Oversight.
Okay.
It's not a given.
It's Do we understand what this is? Therefore, very interesting thing, you see another interesting thing also. Let's say the laws of, for example, the laws of Kachim, where you have to be in Karbonis. The Torah says, for example, that if you do certain Chatoyim, for example, that Chayav Koros, you must bring Karbonis. You see. Now, when we look at a Korban, it's a strange thing. And that's what we're going to really be getting to later on, the study of Kachim. If you look at a Korban, when you look at it, what's going on over here? They take an animal, they shech the animal, they kill the animal, then they take some of the blood and they throw it on the Mizbeach, and then they chop the animal up and they throw it on the Mizbeach and they burn it. I mean, what is going on over here? It looks like some big ritual. It's like a ritual of some sort. Or ceremony of some sort. There are many ceremonies. For example, there's a certain ceremony that on Sukkot, you take 4 different biological, botanical products, you put it together and you shake it. Right? What is that? Like a ceremony and so on. The truth of the matter, when you look at it, it's also a cute little ceremony. Also in the morning you take out some things, little boxes, and you put one on your head and you put one on your arm. That's another ceremony. There are many other rituals. There's a ritual, for example, that if there's a dead person in a room and you walk in the room, suddenly you develop a state of something, you become Tomei. You see. And if you walk into the base of Mikdash and you eat something of this korban, this animal that burnt and so on, and you ate it, some guy can go over and start smacking you with a whip. That's another ceremony. It's another ritual. Now, what am I doing here? What I'm really doing is I'm really describing to you the halachas of Torah in a very primitive way. And the truth of the matter is that's really what it is. That's how really most people understand it. If you're really honest with yourself. If you're honest with yourself and you look at Kachim, you say, what is going on around here? Really? You see, so this sounds like very primitive activity. If you look at the laws of Tumah V'Tahara, it's incredible, the laws of Tumah V'Tahara. For example, if you look at Maseches Olos, in Maseches Olos, if you have a dead body, someone comes in the room, becomes Tomei too. But how does it become Tomei? It depends on what's the shelter, what's the oil. It depends on what it's composed of, and how much is sticking out, and how much is not sticking out. And it depends on, sometimes you can block it, sometimes, like, who wrote this? Like, what is this? Because fundamentally, if you really think about the laws, if you look at the halachas of Torah, really, if you look at the laws of Tumah V'Tahara, if you look at the Kachim, you look at Zvoyim, there are many things in the Torah. I don't want to compete with other voices. It's explained. If you look at the halachas, if you look at the halachas of Torah, you see some of them make sense, like the Mishpatim. You're not supposed to steal. Well, I can understand why you're not supposed to steal. If everyone starts stealing, that's the end of all monetary possessions. Reality really can't, remain too organized after that. I can understand. You're not supposed to kill. I can understand why you're not supposed to kill. But why in heaven's name? You see, why in heaven's name can't I touch a dead sheretz? What is the difference if I touch a dead sheretz? Really? You know what I mean? Or why is it that? Why is it that if I go over and I eat something which the Kohen was supposed to eat, something which I gave to him, I'm a farmer, and then I take a 50th of my land, and I said to the Kohen, Chaim Yankel, come here, come over here. I said, here, nada. The Torah says I got to take part and I give it. This is tzedakah. This is tzedakah. I can understand. You got to give the Kohanim because they're the priestly class. They have to over it in the base of Mikdash and so on. So you got to feed them. Okay, so you give them too much. I can understand. This is like expensive. So you give the Kohen starts eating it. So you walk over and you walk and say, that's very interesting what you just have over there. You give them a piece of meat, for example, and the Kohen barbecues the meat. You walk over and you eat the barbecued meat. Suddenly you chayav kos. But this was my piece of meat before I gave it to you. This is too much. What's going on over here? I'm going to be killed because I ate this piece of meat. What really is going on? If you really think of it for a second, when you look at the halachas of Torah, they appear to be ceremonial, ritualistic, and so on. If you look at other religions, for example, primitive religions, you look at Christianity, many religions, they all have their ceremonies also. What is the difference? The difference is this. That all the halachas of Tumah V'Tahara and Kachim and Zvoyim are halachas of reality, but a ruchnistic reality. And what the Rebbeinu says is the following: that if you go into the same room as a mess, for example, your neshama, or your whole state will acquire a different kind of state. And therefore, if you go and therefore you eat kachim after that, which has another state on it, you will do a certain spiritual damage. And that damage which is done, which you cannot see, will damage you in turn. Such that the only way to alleviate this damaged condition is by giving you makas. You see, that's a very different way of looking at it. These are not ceremonies, and these are not rituals, and these are not legalisms. Every halach in the Torah is a reflection of a reality, but that reality deals with a reality beyond the senses, and it connects with this reality. And instead of writing a book about that reality, you see, and the laws of that reality, the British rather took those laws and described them behaviorally in terms of what to do and what not to do. You understand what I'm saying? That is endlessly what the Torah is. You see, the Torah is a description of what's called phenomena. That's the key word. It is an event. When a Zohar comes over and eats Tumah, an event has taken place. Just like somebody has come over, you see, and taken a ball and thrown it against the glass window and smashed it. That is a real event. When someone comes over and eats, it is an event. But there is no evidence, there is no sensory evidence for that event. You see. But the Torah is being made that this event has taken place.
Wouldn't a person keep a mitzvah if he knows the effect of the reality?
That is your tachlis. That is exactly what the Torah wants. The Torah wants you to keep these things. But what the Torah really wants fundamentally is that you should understand these things as well. Yes. You see. Therefore, what we see is that the religions of mankind, all the other religions, and their legal systems, are what's called cause and effect external systems. You see, what connects the cause to the effect, or whatever have you, is simply an external reality. You see, the Torah, which is a reflection of the reality itself, you see, it's a phenomenological system, and in that sense, it has the same legitimacy, or rather, the same power as physics. Now, you may say, what do you mean as physics? More than physics. I say to you, halavai, as much as physics in your mind. Because when you really begin to see the Torah as a reality, you will begin to behave very differently. You know? A form guy says, what do you mean? You know, it's like what do you mean as much? Much more. The Torah is much greater than the world, the ruchnistic world is much greater than what do you call it? The Torah is much greater than the universe and so on. That's lip service, really. You see, because in reality, who really regards it as such? You really think into it. It just looks like a lot of strange, different activities going on. But if you realize that these are realities which are going on, and these can have critical effects on you, critical effects. If you walk out on Shabbos and you have a key, and you walk out and you're over the Malach of Yitzhak, you're chayav skila with Adam and Aswal. You may say, what did I do? I just carried a key from Rishus to Rishus. So these people told me it was wrong. So I didn't believe them. Why should I be stoned? You know what I mean? Because it is a very powerful reality. The damage you did was so severe that the punishment says, I must now disconnect you from Olam Hazeh and no longer allow you the opportunity of continuing mitzvahs to get more and more schar. You have forfeited the opportunity called Olam Hazeh. You see what I'm saying? That's the reality. Just like, for example, if a person takes antifreeze, you know, he's pouring in his car and he says, I'm thirsty. And then he takes the antifreeze and starts drinking it down, right? Right? What happens to the person? He dies. Antifreeze is poisonous. It's fatal. It's swallowed, if you look at the bottle. Right? Now the person says, why in heaven's name should I die? It's only it's a blue liquid which tastes a little odd, but all it is it's a blue liquid. That's all it is, you know, with a little sour taste on it. Why should I have to die? The answer is, when you ingest benzene and alcohol and phenol and all this stuff, your whole system goes haywire, and you die. You see what I'm saying? So you say, why if I eat this piece of tumor, why am I chayav kolos? You see, there's no more logic that says, or no less reason than if you drank antifreeze. Really? You see what I'm saying? It's as simple as that. Yeah.
So, when a person dies, is it that the Eibishter says he has to disconnect it, that there's no more time to So if you look at somebody, let's say a tzaddik is killed or dies, whatever, you say there that he did something that the Eibishter says he has no more opportunity to start? Or is it more something else having an overall effect for somebody else? Is it subjective on that person himself?
This is really a side question, but the thing is, the death of a person means the cessation of opportunity. What would have caused that? Could be a number of items. It could be because of
that person himself that caused the cessation?
No, not necessarily. No. In this case, it is. The guy does a chet.
You say it's internal. You cause your reality.
If you do a chet, which is chayav mitzvah,
right,
then you have ceased yourself. That's true. But if you are tzaddik and you don't do something and you die, then the Banishim has ceased you. He feels that in order for you to accomplish what you've done, you've finished your job. There's no more to be done. So hence he disconnects you. But only because you've finished your job. You see, you finished doing what you had to do. But
so you still can't describe everything.
Who?
You could say either somebody causes himself to stop because he did something wrong, or the Eibishter says you've done your taki, you've finished what you could do, and now I'm disconnected. How about when a little kid dies, a 2-year-old?
But death is a physical reality. Death is a physical reality. It occurs in reality. Now, what we're saying is we're trying to understand the relationship of halachas to death. Well, what do we see? What we see is that how is it possible that when you're over halacha, a certain lav, you should die? How can it be so severe? The answer is because in this case, if you do a certain halacha, you have done certain things, certain damages in reality, which lead to this kind of consequence.
The ruchnis
yeah, so ruchnis thing. Now there are other things which can also lead to death, you see, which are not visible. They're not halachas. A guy dies because he dies. His time on earth is thing. It has to do with other laws of the hashgacha. It's a different thing. It comes from a different area, a different thing. We're not concerned with that. What we're essentially concerned with is simply this concept. You see, that the halachas of the Torah have the potency of reality. They have the potency of reality. That's why they enmesh with reality in such a powerful way. That's the only concept we're trying to understand here. You know what I mean? We're not interested in understanding why people die or this kind of thing. There are many other things that go on, realities which are beyond. The hashgacha itself is also reality. How the Baruch runs the bria is also reality. We're not dealing with that issue here. We're simply dealing here with the tayyag mitzvahs. That the tayyag mitzvahs have the potency or the power of an absolute reality themselves just as much as anything in physics, biology, or chemistry does. This is not true of any other system. You see, it's not true of the systems, the law systems of mankind, or the rituals and ceremonies which are created from cultures. Those are man-made. Man-made means, you see, that the entire introduction and movement of these things are purely at the hands of man. You see, man has to lead it step by step. You see, when we see that these things, when the Banisha makes something, his making it means he brings it into being. So the cause and effect is part of the laws of that reality. You see what I'm saying? The Torah, when you use that word that it's divine, even though you didn't realize what you're saying, when we see that something is divine, it means that it means that it is phenomenal, or it is actual, it is identical, it is events in reality. That's what it means to say. That's what it means to say something is divine. You see, it is not cultural, it's not a convention that you and I have agreed on certain things that we should do, that in the morning every time people get up, they say hello. And you say hello. We have agreed that. We can also agree to say, we can say shut up. And you say, shut up. That's all for that. You know what I mean? That's the different societies, you know what I mean? We have agreed through the societal norms that these are the various things, how we talk to each other, our laws, the ceremonies, our rituals, these are all man-made. They have no legitimacy, and they have no strength other than what man gives them.
Conventions.
What?
Conventions.
They're conventions. But something which was created, you see, when the British made the Bria, and this is a very critical thing, when we say that there's something called Maimon HaSinai, when we say there's something called Maimon HaSinai, and we say that the British gave the Torah, you see, you have to understand what that means. It doesn't mean that he sat there telling to Moshe a whole bunch of things to do and not to do. That's not what he was saying. That's not what it means that the British have done. What it means is that the British was telling Moshe what the laws of reality are in die ruchnistige Welt and how it interacts with the laws of current reality too. Physical reality, you see. Let's take another point. The Bereshit created the physical universe, correct? The Bereshit created the physical universe. Okay. If the Bereshit wanted to write a book, you see, on physics, or on biology, let's say the Bereshit says, I want to describe the laws, I want to tell mankind how I made the Bria. Since I'm the one who made it, I want to tell them how it was done. So he writes a book on biology and so on, right? Could you imagine what kind of book that would be? That would be an incredibly complex book. What, for example, the human eye, right? You all see me now, right? I am an image in your brain, okay? Do you know what it takes for the human eye to process just one image? There are 100 million cells in the retina which are sending 100 million impulses to the brain at every second of time. The brain, in order to form one image, must process 100 million electrochemical impulses that it's receiving. You know what a staggering job that is? That's just the sight, you know? If the Bereshit therefore wanted to sit down and say, I want to write a book on the human eye, and I want to explain how it works, can you imagine what an incredible book this would be? It is. It would be unbelievable. If the Bereshit wanted to write a book on mathematics, he didn't want Euclid to write a book on the elements of geometry, or to Isaac Newton to come up with the calculus. He said, I want to teach you mathematics. So imagine what kind of book this would be. It would be had to do with math. No, I don't want to write a book on the human eye, and I don't want to write a book on physics, and I don't want to write a book on mathematics. I want to write a different book. And the book that I'm going to give you is the best, most incredible book, you see, that could ever be written. So you sit there and say, where is it? Give it to me, you know. So Bereshit says, here it is. You open up, that's what it is. That's the only thing that the Bereshit saw fit to be Megal to the Bria, Torah. You look into the thing, you look in the Torah, and you look around and you say, wait a minute, this is a very strange book. You see, it's a very strange book. It talks about really strange kinds of activities. Men taking animals and doing this, I mean, all kinds of things which seem to be very, like strange kind of things. Not only that, it's written in a very funny way. You see, it doesn't, its organization is strange. It doesn't really repeat itself. It repeats itself a lot. It writes all kinds of things. The organization is very funny. So you see this, if the Bereshit had written a book on physics or on something else, it would be an incredible book in terms of its organization, the way it's written and so on. But if you look at the Torah, like, when you see, if you look at the Torah and you look at the Torah and you say, did a divine mind write this? Now honestly, when you look at the Torah, does it look like a divine mind wrote that? No, it doesn't. Why do we know a divine mind wrote it? Because we know from the Kabbalah, from Moshe Sinai to this day, we know that this book, HaTorah Hazeh, was given by the Bereshit. Look into it, you really cannot see it. You really can't see it. It's very, very difficult to see. Why? Because we don't realize, fundamentally, we don't realize what it is that's being written. It says in Chazal, the Bereshit looked into the Torah and created the world. That's what it says. Which means that the Torah is the blueprint of the Bria. It is the blueprint. Somewhat everything in all reality, not only in this physical world, but in the ruchnistic world, in all reality, is contained in that Torah, which is a staggering thing, and so on. Yet when we look at it, we cannot see it. But what we do know, and what we can understand, is that when we say that the Bereshit wrote this Torah, and this Torah is Megala to us, what it's Megala to us is really an understanding of all the laws and all the phenomena and events which occur in all realities. That is essentially what this Torah really is. That's what it means that the Torah inscribed it, or what it means that the Bereshit gave a Torah. And that's what it means, the kind of book that he gave, except that the book is written in such a way that it's hidden, it's sosim in our eyes. It is hidden from the eyes. But in essence, it is nothing more than a book on reality. You see, on all realities, and how they connect, and what their purpose is, and so on. In that way, the Torah is much greater than any other book written on reality, physics, medicine, biology, chemistry. Why? Because all these books on reality describe the events or phenomena or the laws of reality as they behave from what we can see. Certain isolated or restricted parts of reality. Physics, right? The laws of physics attempt to describe energy and matter and the behavior of matter and energy. Chemistry attempts to explain how different compounds and substances combine. Biology attempts to understand what life is and how life relates to chemicals and so on and the different processes of life. They're very restricted in that sense. That's why the Baruch Shem says, I'm not writing such a book. Because when I write a book, it's a total book. I'm writing the book that has it all brought in there. The cooler ball. Everything is in there. Except that I've written in such a way where it is not obvious to the human mind at first thought. You must really go into it. But you cannot begin to understand what the Baruch Shem wrote until you first understand what it means that he's writing the book, or what he's writing about. You cannot begin to really understand the Torah until you really understand that what the Baruch Shem is really writing about is phenomena, or events, or reality. That's really what he's talking about. As long as you see halachas in terms of do's and don'ts, you see, interesting, behavior patterns, rituals, or ceremonies, or legalities. As long as you see the Torah in that way, you cannot understand what the Baruch Shem is talking about. You see, because you are seeing the Torah in terms of all the other systems, man-made systems. And even though the Torah looks like a man-made system, it does look like a man-made system because it parallels man-made systems. It has laws there, it has certain laws of purity and impurity, it has laws of criminal laws, it has laws of marriage, laws of charity, of society. These are laws which are generally constructed by man. So you see this, what does this have to do with reality? You see, the answer is it may appear to be like laws of man, but in effect, it really talks about laws that deal with reality. So this is a very, very fundamental thing. What was very clear, see, you may say to yourself in your mind, where is this guy leading to? I mean, it's very interesting what he's saying. It's a nice thought. Where is it leading to? The answer is, if you understand what I'm saying, and I believe you all do, it has profound implications on the very learning of Torah, of how it's to be learned. You see, it has very profound implications on the whole way of looking at it. Once you begin to see halachas as events and phenomena, you can no longer look at them as some rituals or just some laws, legalities to be man-made. They have to be looked at much more rigidly and much more precisely.
You learn Lishma.
You see, but
you learn Lishma.
Well, it's learning Lishma, but it's understanding it from a much different framework. And that's the whole thing. That's what the next part is. Once we understand it, the question is, what framework are we really coming from? And here, that's where we really begin to talk about what we call, the method and so on, which is it's an analytical process. It's a way of handling this kind of material based on this fundamental assumption, and it leads to radically different results, very radically different results, or different kind of understanding, a different kind of grasp. In that way.
So you happen to be taking as the content of the message.
What's that?
In this theory, you're taking as the content of the message to halachas or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not restricted.
No, it's not. I get it later. There's other phenomenal systems. At that point, this is the only one. As far as we're concerned, we're talking about halachas. You see, that's what we're talking about. The tight halachas. There are other, even more deeper systems than that, but I'm not going into that. You'll understand it later on. Right now we're talking about halachas. Do you understand that what I'm saying? What it means, what Maimon Asira is, what it is, what really happened here, and how the Torah could have been written, and how it really is written.
So,
its connections.
So our task is to understand how certain halachas affect that particular reality.
Well, it's more than that. Well, it's much deeper than that. To understand what the halacha is itself. What is the reality? Period.
Right.
What is this?
Right. What is the reality, and how a certain halacha affects the cause and effect?
Yes. How it's done. How the effect. The laws of this reality. That's really it all. It's to understand in the laws. So therefore, really, what Torah really is, in a more sophisticated approach, what really is Torah? Torah is really therefore nothing more than to understand the laws of all these realities. That's really what it is. You see, fundamentally, the scholar, the Chachma of Torah, is to understand what is this reality and what are these laws. Why do things happen in this way? That's really what it is. You see, but it produces a different kind of methodology in order to have that approach. Everyone was here last week, basically, what we said. And we started speaking about the method last week. And no, I'm not going to review this. Just the one idea that we said last week was that all the halachas that we see in the Torah are essentially events. They're phenomena. They're mamash realities. Except that they talk about the realities of a different world. A world with different substances. It's called the ruchnistic world. And it talks about the events of that world. And all the halachas are megala. They're all megala, the reality of that world itself. In that way, the cause and effect relationships which exist in these events all exist by virtue of the natural order itself. Whereas, and we compare that, we contrast to that, to the systems of mankind, the legal systems of mankind, the ceremonies, rituals of mankind and so on, then essentially these are systems where the cause and effect of the two are caused by an external agent, man himself. And without that external agent, nothing happens. Now, what does this all tell us? This tells us a very, very important thing. And it is so important that it in a certain sense, it forces us into a certain, almost a radical departure from everything that we've ever seen up to now. If we accept what we've said to now, and there are many riots, you may say to me, well, how do I know that halachas are realities? How do I know that they're events, phenomena? Maybe they're not. There are many statements of Chazal that point to this, almost many things, the whole Kabbalah you could see is along that direction. There are many things that go along that clearly indicate that kind of thing. The acceptance of this particular premise, or this particular idea, leads us to a whole different way of understanding the situation. What it means is that we have to look at the Torah from a totally different set of eyes. Well, different from a certain standpoint. From another standpoint, it's not different at all. What does it mean if we say to ourselves, we now want to understand Torah? What essentially does it mean to us now? You see, it means we want to understand the reality of these halachas. Why do they behave the way they do? Why are the way they do? You see. Now, what do I mean by that? In order to try and get an understanding of what it means to understand certain things, I want to take us a field now away from Torah and go into another field. And I will give all the necessary information for those who are not familiar with these facts. We said that Torah essentially are events, phenomena. Shabbos is a phenomenon. Tumah is a phenomenon. A korban is an event. Something is happening in reality. Tumah, something is happening in reality. If it's an event, it's similar in certain ways like other realities. For example, the universe. Scientists attempt to understand the universe. For example, they attempt to understand the physics of the universe, or the laws of matter and energy. Oh, just started. The physical universe, in the physical universe, the laws of science, for example, they also deal with realities. They deal with physical realities. That's what they deal with. They deal with realities, also phenomena. How does the physicist understand his reality, his phenomena? Okay, we're going to go into physics now, into the history of physics, and we're going to see how they approach the understanding of physical phenomena. In In the 15th century, when people lived at that time, they would notice motion, movement, things move. A lot of things being moved. There's movement all around the world. Everywhere you look, something is moving. We move, this moves, the wind moves, water moves, waves. You look up in the heavens, the stars move, not stars move, they do, but I don't know, the planets move, whatever, comets, everything's in motion. So a person would sit and think to himself, motion, that's a reality. What causes motion? What determines how something moves? What is motion? That's what a physicist would ask. He wants to understand the reality of motion, which is an event. It's one of the phenomena of the universe. It's motion. It's an event. A long time ago, there were people that used to look up in the universe, and they would see many different types of motions. They would see the moon in different phases. They would notice that they noticed that the sun moves, or it moves around the earth. The moon moves around the earth. They could see the motions of the planets. Jupiter, the known planets at that time, the visible planets. They could see Venus on the horizon at dawn. They could see Mars. They could see the motions of the planets. They could see the constellations. And they say to themselves, how do these things move? Why do they move the way they do? So there was a man whose name was Tycho Brahe. He's a Dane. Tycho Brahe was a friend of the Maharal. Yeah, you know? It's Mama Prague, yeah.
Just so Moses knows it if I have middle nose.
He was an astronomer. And what he did was, for 20 years, Tycho Brahe was a Danish astronomer, and he set up an observatory, and for many years, he charted the different movements of different celestial objects, planets, stars, constellations, so on, and he recorded all this in vast sets of notes, and records and so on. He had the most advanced equipment at the time. They had what's called an astrolabe and sextants, different kinds of things they used to use. This is before the telescope. So he used that to understand that. But if you went over, all these years later, and you say to Tycho Brahe, why do these things move this way? Tycho Brahe would say, I'll tell you the truth, I have no idea. I don't know what goes on up there. I can simply describe to you what's going on. But if you ask me why is it happening, I have no idea. He had a Talmud, a very great Talmud. His name was Johannes Kepler. I don't know if you heard the name. He was a very great Talmud, and what he did was, he looked at all the notes. If you of Tycho Brahe, all the different measurements and all the observations, and he looked at them, and he tried to understand some kind of a pattern. Trying to figure out, is there a pattern here of some sort? Tycho Brahe himself did not see a pattern, although he was familiar with the different kinds of motions. So he looked at the pattern of the planets, the planetary motions and so on. And this was after Copernicus already. This was after Copernicus. So they knew that the sun goes around the earth. They knew that the earth goes around the sun and all the planets go around the earth. They already knew this. They knew that the sun was in the center and that the planets went around the sun. And he looked at all these observations and he figured out, from 20 years of observations, the pattern of planetary motion. He first of all realized several things. He realized if the sun is here, right? The sun is here. Technical. If the sun is here, we need a stereophonic sound. Now, if the sun is over here, right? Then the planets are all moving around the sun in what's called ellipses, not circles. A circle is like this, right? An ellipse is like this.
Something like that.
An ellipse. An ellipse is like an egg. It's an oval shape. That's an ellipse. He noticed that all of these go around the sun in an ellipse. That's the one. So therefore he established the first law of planetary motion. All planets circle the sun in the surah and the form of an ellipse, which is a certain geometrical thing. Number one. Number two, he was able to figure out that planets, for example, the sun is over here, you see, and the planet was over here. When the planet is closer to the sun here, and here's the other part of the orbit, it goes around the orbit like this. So at a certain time of the year it's over here, and another time it's over here, it's the far side of the sun. So what he said is that the sun is at one of the foci of the ellipse. It's not the center of it. You have the center of the circle, but an ellipse doesn't have a center. It has what's called two foci. That's how you make an ellipse. The sun is at one of the foci of the ellipse. And he said that when the planet is at the closer end to the sun, it moves much faster. And when it's the longer end, it moves much slower. He was able to figure such a thing out. And now he was able to figure out the relationship, basically, between how long it takes to go around the sun, you see, and I think how far it is from the sun, through a certain kind of equation. So it's an incredible thing. He was actually able to see patterns in planetary motion. But if you went over to Johannes Kepler and you said, that's all very interesting, you have described the pattern of planetary motion, but why does it move that way? Why does a planet run around the sun in an ellipse? Why? Why doesn't it go around in a circle? Why does it go around at all? Why does it go straight out there like why? You know what I mean? Johannes Kepler could still say, I don't know. You would say what?
Yeah.
He doesn't know. He has no idea why. A little while later, about 100 years later, there popped up another man, you see. And he was probably one of the greatest minds that has ever lived. You see, extraordinary mind, and you'll all understand that. His name was Sir Isaac Newton. And he was an extraordinary, incredible cup. I mean, when the Baruch Hashem gave out a cup, the Miyachid, the special cup, the Goyim, it was more than they gave him a cup. They gave him minutes to do Oris. But anyway, we won't go into that. The point is, he looked at the world, and he said to himself, wait a minute. The old story has it that in I think it was 1624, that's the famous year. 1624, 1626, it's called Anas Murabit. It's called the great year, the famous year. In that year, he reshaped the Bria. Mankind was never the same after and before that year. Because when the Zohar said that the Mayanot HaChochmah was opened up suddenly, it opened up and came down onto Isaac Newton. What is it? What? Well, he was. Him and Galileo were the beginnings of the whole.
Didn't live in the 17th?
1650, 1670.
The apple fell on his head.
Yeah. Oh, now I understand. Almost. What happened was, he was a student at Oxford or Trinity College in England, and there was a cholera, some kind of epidemic there. So he left and he went to his stepmother's house or his mother's house. He was sitting on a farm, and one day he was sitting by a tree and he noticed an apple and it fell down. Now everyone sees everything falling. What's the big deal? See, but he was thinking about certain problems. And that falling of the apple, if it's true, they say it's a legend, but if it's true, suddenly created something in his mind. And created the idea. There's an old statement, Pasteur once said that chance favors the prepared mind. There are many things that go on in the world out there, but the one who understands the significance of it is the one who's muchen and mezumen to understand what's going on before, because he was thinking of things that have shaykhs to this also. That's how it generally works. It favors the prepared mind in that sense. So Newton was thinking about these planetary laws and trying to understand what it was. And then he realized an incredible zach. He said, wait a minute. He said the following: is it possible that the apple falls? Everyone knows that an apple falls. But is it possible that the apple falls because there is a force, you see, between the apple and the earth, such that the force caused them to attract each other, number one. And number two, is that the same reason why the moon goes around the earth and the earth goes around the sun? You see, that's what he asked himself this question. And he said yes, and he proved it later on. And he said that the reason what's going on over here is that there is a certain force in the world, you see, called gravity. It is a force which exists between any two objects which possess substance or mass. right, attract each other with a force called gravity. It's true of every object in the Bria. Every object attracts every other object. That's a force. And not only was he able to understand that, but he says, wait a minute, he was able to describe that force mathematically, you see. So that he said that the quantity or the magnitude of the force, the power of the force, sounds like a short physics. The power of the force depends on how big the mass is and how far away they are from each other. It is what's called directly proportional to mass. It means if you double the mass, you double the force. So that if you take two objects and you double the mass, the force between them becomes twice as strong. But if you take them and you put them twice as far, then the force is cut by a quarter, not by a half. It varies inversely with the square of the distance.
We'll have a test.
Let's see. You both those who remember the physics. Right. Well, just, the equation is good. Yeah. That's the right. It's directly proportional to the mass, right? And it's inversely proportional to the square of the distance. Now, so therefore, and then once he understood this force, you see, once he understood this concept of gravity, right, and the notion of the notion of gravity and the forces, together with the mathematics called the calculus, which he also made in that year, he put it together, and in 10 minutes, he figured out, in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it was, what it took Kepler and Bray 20 years to establish. By understanding the force in the Bria, which produces the motion, and by understanding how that force affects motion by mass and distance, right, he was able to instantly predict, automatically, and understand the Keplerian laws of planetary motion. He understood exactly why the planets must follow an ellipse, and why they must go faster at this point than at that point. You see, by understanding the laws or the forces behind the Bria, he was able to understand why the world looked the way it did. You see, so therefore, what Tycho Brahe and Kepler were only able to describe, he was able to understand. You understand? How was he able to understand? Because he didn't more than just know the patterns. He understood what caused the motion in terms of more fundamental physical processes. You see, instead of being concerned with the process of you have a planet here, and you have a sun, and the planet moves around in a shape called an ellipse, and the way Kepler understood it, he looked at it in a different way. There's something called the sun which has this mass, and this has this mass. There's a force of gravity between them. You see? And that this gravity depends on the mass size, on the inverse proportional distance, and the calculus. He was actually able to figure out, you see, why there was an ellipse and all the other stuff that Kepler had. Okay? Now, if you went over to Newton and you said, this is very nice, and from that point, he did an incredible thing. Because before Newton came along, people saw many different types of motions. Things were falling, smoke rises, there's waves on the ocean, planets go here and there. All those different motions made no sense. Once Newton gave a Havana to the sense of how things move, or rather, why they move the way they do, you see, it was possible to understand many motions that he didn't even talk about. For example, comets. And from his laws of motion and his laws of gravity, they were able to predict exactly when a comet would return, when there would be a solar eclipse, many, many things which were extraordinary. And from then on, they developed the whole understanding of astronomy. From then on, after Newton, they were able to understand how almost every motion takes place in the universe, which is unbelievable. That was the power of his explanation. You see what I mean when I say the Buddha Shem? And it did something. So
he didn't explain it from the
that's what Newton did.
Right, yeah, that's right.
Now, if you went over, not so. If you went over to Newton and you said, excuse me, this sounds very interesting, but what is this force called gravity? So Newton would say, well, what do you mean? So you would say, wait a minute. What is a force? How does something move? In order for if something is at rest, how does it move? It moves if you apply a force, if you push it or you pull it, right? But in order to push and pull it, you've got to come in contact with it. That's called a contact force. What in heaven's name is between the earth and the sun such that these two are close to each other? They don't touch each other. What is this force? You see, Newton calls this force action at a distance, because that's what it is. Even though these two things are 93 million miles away, they still have enough of force to attract each other, and they tend to go together. If you would say, what is the nature of this kind of force? Newton would say to you, I have no idea. I do not understand how one object can cause the motion of another object 93 million miles away. See.
Why doesn't this force make that the object should hit the sun?
Oh, you mean why does no go into the sun?
The
answer is...
It's advanced physics.
The answer is...
It's not an introduction to physics.
This is physics, but I just the answer is because the truth of the matter is that if you have let's say, a body like this, right? Let's say a body, and another body is coming from outer space somewhere else, and it's approaching that body. Normally, any object in motion continues in a straight line, right? By inertia. That was Galileo. That's also the law of inertia. An object in motion will stay in motion in a straight line by itself, without any force. It's a natural state. So an object coming from this way, right, will stay in motion. Now, gravity, right? Another object, when it comes to this point, right, there will be a force of gravity, right? So therefore, the force of gravity will attempt, right? Please. The force of gravity will attempt to move the object towards the body, right? But its inertia will attempt to keep it in motion this way. There are two opposing forces, hence it will go this way. You see, and the same thing will happen at any point. So it goes this way, this way, this way, that way. What do we begin to see? An orbit.
Well, shouldn't it change at one point?
No.
Differ?
No.
The same gravity,
same force at the same time, right? You see what I'm saying? That's why, but that's a side question. Okay. Now, there came along 200 years later, 250 years later, another man, who in my opinion, was given the greatest earnest, the earnest that don't belong, the earnest that do not belong to physics. They really belong to other areas, but they're in physics at this point in time. We won't explain that. This man is Albert Einstein, who was probably one of the most incredible brains that has ever lived. Incredible mind that has ever lived, in that sense. And Einstein said, wait a minute, I can explain to you what gravity is. And this is what he said. And he said this in the general theory of relativity. What he said gravity was the following. Gravity is not a force, really. It's not a force the way we know forces. It's rather what's called a metrical force. What do we mean by metrical force? It means this. When you have a certain object in space, that object bends space. Now you may say, how can you bend space? What is there to bend? That's because you fail to understand a very important point. Space, empty space, has structure. You may say, how can empty space have structure? Well, I asked you this question. What is the shortest point between two lines? A straight line. A line joining the two. Right? Why? What makes it be that way? Why is it that between this point and that point... Oh, yeah, but wait.
Because they don't mention it.
Oh, wait, no. This. You don't realize what's going on here. Hold on. It's rhetorical. I'm not asking you. It's rhetorical. I want to answer it. Why is it, you see, that 2 points, a straight line is what joins these points? If you have a line going like this, that's wrong. Right? As they say, as the crow flies, a straight line like this. Why? Because how many dimensions does space have? How many?
We know.
How many dimensions does this have?
3, 6.
What?
3.
No.
It has a dimension of time.
I didn't say how many sides does it have. How many dimensions does it have?
3. We know 3.
How many? 3. Forget about time.
Three Einstein.
Yeah, I know, time. Years I'm talking about time. No, if I was looking to it, only has 3. We're talking about space. Okay, now, if this thing is right, so what do we have 3 dimensions, right? Well, look. This thing is on, This thing is on the table. We see this thing on the table, right? We see this, right? Is it picking up my voice? Oh, I'll use this. I'm sorry. This thing has 3 dimensions, right? Right, look. It has length, it has width, right? And it has height. What does it mean it has? What does that mean it has 3 dimensions? What is this thing? This thing is a substance, right? It's some kind of material. But that material extends itself in 3 different directions. That's what it means. It extends itself this way, that way, and this way. You mean? Each of these directions is perpendicular to the other. You understand what perpendicular means? It's at 90 degrees. This direction is perpendicular to that, which is perpendicular to this. You see what I'm saying?
You can draw no more perpendicular.
Not in our world. Wait a minute. Let me explain. Okay, not in our world. You understand? What that means? That this object extends itself in 3 different directions. That's what it means. Now, the extent that the dimensions themselves are rigid. You see, if you have empty space with nothing there, it also has 3 dimensions, doesn't it? Empty space is also 3-dimensional, even though there's nothing there, because the space goes in 3 different directions. You see what I'm saying? That means that empty space, you see, is itself structured, even though there's nothing in it. You see, we think that which is matter is something, but that which is space is nothing. Space is an absence of matter or substance, but it is not an absence of structure. There is something called space, which has a certain structure, and the structure that it has is in 3 dimensions. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? It does have it. And all objects or matter which exist in space, which inhabit space, extend themselves in those 3 dimensions. Now, it's possible for space to have 4 dimensions. For space to have 4 dimensions means that it has a 4th direction, which is perpendicular to the other 3. Now, where is that? We do not know. We cannot conceive of such a thing at all. It's not shaykh for us to conceive of such a thing.
You have an edit.
What? No, conceptually, it's mathematically possible. There could be a you can have a space of 50,000 dimensions. It doesn't mean it is. It simply means that you can have such a possibility. You can write formulas for it, so on. You know, it doesn't have to have but conceptually, that's called mathematical space. It has, because since space has structure, it can have any type of structure. Our space, what we live in, physical space, you see, has 3 dimensions. Mathematical space, which is space in general, the general nature of it, has infinite, any number of dimensions. For example, this piece of paper, right? It's really, that's not in the subject, I'm going deviating a little bit, but it's really worthwhile to say. This piece of paper, let's say this is the entire universe. And what it is, it's a 2-dimensional world. It means that anything which, this world only goes this way and that way. Because there's no width, there's no height. Everything is this way. That means this is a Bria. This is Reuben. Meet Reuben. Reuben lives on this world. Right? Now Reuben also only has 2 dimensions. What? Yes. What? No, it's possible. This is only a 2-dimensional world. It's a world where the space only goes this way and that way. So therefore, this world is a space of a plane. For example, a plane. For example, the top of this table only has 2 dimensions, right? The plane. Let's say this is an object which lives on this. So this object is extended in 2 dimensions and it moves around this world, just like we move around. You know, it moves here. Here's another object. This is Zebulun, Yisachar and Zebulun, and they move around, they talk to each other. But you see, they move around. Now, we're a 3rd-dimensional object, which means that we not only have this way and that way, but we have height. So we can look down on this world, from outside of it. The eyes of these people are, look over here, the eyes of these people are in the front, here. You see, so they can see in front of them, but they can only see this way and that way. So they turn around, they only see what's there. You know what I mean? That's all they cannot see up. Because up doesn't exist. Look means up. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? There is no up. In this world, it's a hypothetical world, it doesn't exist, but it's possible. The Banishim could have made a world with only 2 dimensions, where space exists as a plane. Their whole world is this big table here. You know, but it goes out to infinity. But the whole thing is a tabletop. You know what I mean? You can go this way and that way. But you cannot go up and down. There's no, it's no existence. Matter doesn't extend itself this way. Only, you know what I mean? And so when they look here, they're moving around, and they see this way and that way. Comes along a third guy, right? Comes along, you see, comes along a sphere. A sphere is a ball, right? A sphere who can only talk. A sphere. And he's standing out here, up here. So he can talk, and they hear a voice in this world. They hear a voice. And they hear a voice, hello, where did this voice come from? They look around, and there's nothing in the vast area. So he says, my name is Yisachar Sphere. I'm a sphere, and I exist outside your world. I'm in a 3rd dimension. So third dimension? What is the 3rd dimension? Well, if you look up, you will see me. Up? What is up? So he says, wait a minute. I'll tell you what. You want to see me? I will show you me. So the sphere comes down along the 3rd dimension, and it intersects the table. You see. So suddenly they see something appear. But when they look at the sphere, they only can see the intersection. So they see a circle. You see what I'm saying? They can't see the ball. They can only see the circle. As it intersects the plane, it comes in, it's dissected into it's cut like a circle, like dissected. So they see a circle. And then he said, oh, hey, what? He says, yes, I'm a sphere. He said, you're not a sphere, you're a circle. What is a sphere? He says, no. He says, you see the circle? This circle is really extended up and down. What is up and down? So he says, I'll show you what up and down is. So he says, watch me. So he begins to move up and down. So he moves up, and as he moves up, the circle gets smaller. Do you understand? So they think you're shrinking. He says, I'm not shrinking, I'm moving up. You understand what I'm saying? I'm moving up. This stuff, even though this is a fictional dialogue between the 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional, it is very possible. And I want you to understand something. I want to dig in for a second. An incredible yesod from this thing. You realize something about this thing. For example, a very big thing. The fact that I'm a 3-dimensional, this sphere is a 3-dimensional object, and these are 2, means it has a certain power that they can do, right? What? This thing is a 2-dimensional object, right? Right? And its eyes are out in front here, right? Its eyes are at the tip, and it turns around and it looks. It can only look that which is exactly parallel to it on its plane, right? But it also has a guf, a body. Where is the body? This is the body, right? And these little words here are the organs. That's the internal organs, right? Now, this thing cannot see its organs, right? And when it meets another object, right? It meets another object, it sees it's outside. Cannot see inside. You know what I mean? You understand? It cannot see inside. It can only see outside of the thing. That's how, you know? But a sphere, since it's up, can look down and says, wait a minute, I see all your organs. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because of the fact that I exist in a dimension which is at 90 degrees to you. You see, it's perpendicular to you. I can look down on you and I can see inside you. You see what I'm saying? Now, why do I say this? Because a being in the 4th dimension would be able to see us exactly in the same way.
Inside out.
If you took a safe, right, and you took an object, right, a certain object, and you put it inside a safe. For example, let's say this was a safe, right? Right? What? You need a safe. Let's say this is a safe, right? And I put something inside. I open the door here, right? I open the door here in this dimension because you could see this way, and I put something in and I close the door. It's translucent door. Okay, it's up inside. Now, you cannot see what's inside because it's being blocked by the outside here, right? He cannot see inside the safe. But if I was able to peek in the 3rd dimension, I would be able to look up and look down and see what's inside. You see what I'm saying? That means that an object, any person who would exist in the 4th dimension, would exist in a direction which is perpendicular at 90 degrees to all these 3, and he can actually see inside of us. Now, we do not understand how that's possible. Where is there such a direction? You see, it is outside of our experience. The fourth dimensional creature could no more explain to us what that fourth dimension is or where that direction was any more than you could explain a person who was born blind the color red. You see what I'm saying? Because it is an experience. We live in a physical space of 3 dimensions, not 4. You see. What I want to say is that the Gunishon would be able to see what's inside of us, even if he wasn't Ruchnius. Even if he's just a 4th dimensional figure, you can already see things which are Benista. So this amazing thing how our world tends to be very rigid. We think, you see, that's the whole thing, that's one of the things, the reason I want is to show you, we tend to think, the way we look at reality, that Azoi Davazan, you know, it must be this way, it is absolute. It's not absolute, you see. Our reality didn't have to have physical space, didn't have 3 dimensions, it could have 2. In that case, the world would have been totally different. It could have 4, you see. It would be and it's possible that in just like in a 2-dimensional world, you could have a 3-dimensional world which exists above it, and this would never know about it. There can be a 4th-dimensional world, or a world which exists in the 4th dimension, in that direction, above us, that we don't even know about. You see what I'm saying?
So what was Einstein's idea?
Now, what Einstein said was the following. He said that space has structure, you see, but space has what's called Euclidean structure. It means that it goes by straight lines. The 3 dimensions all exist perpendicular to each other, you see, as straight lines. But what Einstein said is that when you have a mass, an object in space, it twists those dimensions so that they become curved, you see. Now when you look at space, you cannot see it curved. But the truth of the matter is, you see, that this object, the space immediately around this object is slightly twisted. We cannot see such a thing, because there's nothing there. With an absence of matter, we cannot notice. But the lines of space, the dimensions are slightly twisted.
How we do
What?
Vertical horizontal lines. Why can't you say it's straight? What is that?
Why is it twisted?
What makes you say that it has to be twisted? Why can't you say it's straight lines at the top of it? Straight lines are twisted, straight lines are
No, it's not.
I mean, technically it doesn't have to be twisted.
No, it doesn't. It's not twisted normally. But what I just said, in normal space, it's not twisted. But when matter, any object comes into any space, it automatically twists the space around it. It has that effect.
Like in water, right?
Do you think Einstein was talking about
I don't want to talk about
essence space or how we deal with space?
No, essence space. He's talking about real space is bent, although we cannot see it. So therefore, that's what gravity is.
The gravity?
No, the mass.
Sorry,
An object, the substance of the object bends this, not gravity, forget about gravity. The matter, or the substance of the space, bends the space around it. It bends it. So therefore, he explains gravity. How does he explain it? Because, for example,